Good evening and welcome to a special edition of the Marty Heiser Show. It's been a sober week. If you've turned on the news, you've seen some grisly human behavior in the Middle East with that journalist that was slaughtered in cold blood. We've seen unrest domestically here in America. A young man was shot, and we can get a shot of him. A young man was shot by a policeman in Ferguson, Missouri, and it turns out he was unarmed. And the community has expressed concern over that, and it's brought about a national debate on what's going on. Are the police brutal, insensitive, don't understand the community that they're working in, and as a result you have a tragedy like this? Or is it maybe something in the African American community that needs to be addressed as far as the right way, the right behavior when being confronted with the police? Why, when we have an African American president, we have an African American attorney general, is there still this type of tension? I've invited, I've begged, I've pleaded with these people to come in. We have Jason Bartlet, former state rep from around here, and a man who now we're just delighted that you're here. Gladys Cooper, who is a Danbury Board of Ed member, as well as Glenda Armstrong, who is the president of the Greater Danbury NAACP. And first, let me just say thank you so much for coming in. We call this a talk show, but I think maybe for tonight it should be more of a listening show. And I'd like to get your perspective on some of these things. First, Jason, I'll start with you. This past week, when you would turn on the TV and you would see the unrest in Missouri, what was your reaction? What was your thought process?
My reaction was that I wanted to get in a car or a bus and go down there and be one of the protesters. That was my reaction, to tell you the truth. I wanted to be there. I still think that I might go there. There might be an opportunity for people to go and express their support for the family and to express their frustration with the system. And you know, it was somewhat of an eye-opener that you could have a majority black town and have only 3 police officers that were African American on that police force. I listened to the rally. I was a little disappointed that, you know, there was no real voter turnout in the last election. Only 12% of the populace voted in that town for their public officials. So it kind of helped me understand a little bit why there's no African Americans on the police force, why the Board of Education isn't reflective of the community, and the fact that, you know, folks that probably shouldn't be in charge are in charge, and that they're not sensitive to their community, to the people that live there. And that's, I think, how we have that situation. And as I continue to watch TV, I continue to see the police. You know, today there's another video of probably somebody has mental health issues, and, you know, they shot him. And I thought that didn't make sense to me watching that. So there's a real problem, I think, in different parts of our country in terms of how we interface with people in general, and particularly with African Americans. And there really needs to be a broader conversation. And having the President of the United States being black it really doesn't change what's on the ground in most communities. It certainly is inspiring, and we all aspire to bring our kids up to have a role model like Barack Obama, but that doesn't change the ground, as I call it, in most of the country. So there is going to be that disconnect. There's a lot of work to be done.
So you said the voter turnout in that community was very low.
12%.
12%. And you touched on a little bit as far as the police force. I just saw interviewed on TV one of the former chiefs of police there, and they said they're desperately trying to get minority representation on the police force, but it's not that easy to do.
Well, all police chiefs say that All police forces say it, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I don't take anything, that they say. I wouldn't take things at their word. It's very easy to recruit and just put it, you do a flyer and say you tried to recruit communities of color. Well, it's not really engaging. It can be done. Other police departments have diversified. Real recruitment can take place. It takes intentional action to do those things, and it's also very easy to eliminate people if you want to eliminate people. So we've been through this. I'm now work for the city of New Haven. New Haven has gone through many a problem over the years. We've had many police, departments, fire departments that we've had to integrate, and it's not an easy thing. And the old guard continues to control, and that's how we have our systems, and it's very difficult to break some.
But you would say, I mean, the minority. You might know the percentages better than I, but. In that community, it's 78, 90% minorities, and on the police force, it's 5 or 6% minority representation, something along that?
Less than that.
Not even that. Okay. So, but what you're saying is that if there was more minorities on the police force, they would culturally understand African American male youths, and it wouldn't come to a head like it did in this incident where a child is shot. Is that kind of your contention?
I'm not sure that's the answer. The answer is that if I have that level of involvement, then I'm going to do outreach in a lot of different ways. This is just not about the police department. And communities such as Danbury or even in Connecticut, we can all sit back and say, well, if I was in Ferguson, this would have happened, or if I was in Ferguson, that would have happened. Jesse Jackson probably said it best to me the other day when he said, every community is a potential Ferguson. Every single community. And so mayors and first selectmen and people can sit back and say, well, it's not going to happen here.
There was never a police shooting in Ferguson pretty much ever, from what I understand.
Right.
There's never been one. This isn't exactly a hotbed for racial tension.
Right. So that's what I'm saying, that any community can have that. And so now, what is going to be your reaction? What are you going to do as a community that might experience this? We would not sit around and wait for a fire to happen. If it was a fire, and then decide we're going to buy fire trucks. We would make sure that we put some kind of process in place so that in case something happened, or to ensure nothing would happen, we'd put some processes in place. And that's why I think this is an opportunity for communities to have a reflective moment. And it's great that I think we would go to Ferguson and offer our support and that kind of thing. But also look at our own house. Look at our own house and make sure that we try to put our own house in order to do some of the things that Jason just spoke of. Are we really reaching out to communities? Do we really want people of color to be on our police forces? Are we putting barometers? Are we putting things in place to keep people from qualifying? I mean, Danbury has things in place. So it's a fair playing field, but when you really look at it, is it a fair playing field? I think when you start to try to figure out how can we keep a Ferguson from happening in a Danbury or in a town in Virginia or a town any place in the country, it's a chance for communities to start to think, what do I have in place? I was struck earlier by Jason stating earlier when we were outside about the military force that was present in those streets. I doubt very seriously when people got those things as a result of Homeland Security that they ever thought that they would be using them on their own citizens.
It is. I mean, it is troubling to me to see these. I'm a visual kind of guy, and to see these scenes unfold. And this is Missouri. I mean, Missouri, the show me state in the middle of cornbread Midwest.
Another video today of a police officer walking up now during the protest with a assault weapon, pointing at the people, telling them if they don't do what he said, he's gonna kill them.
Yeah, I saw that video.
What is that about?
Yeah.
So you're putting these kinds of weapons and this kind of armory in folks' hands that it just shouldn't be. Okay. And so what that does is just rises the level of the anger and the frustration. So, you alluded to looting and so on and so forth earlier, I think, before we got on, but that permeates a community, and the anger just rises. And that's why I really had a lot of respect for that, for the cop that came in from the state troopers,
Captain Johnson.
Yeah.
Yes.
And his whole approach, and that was so dead on in terms of how you communicate and what kind of messages you're sending, and then he brought it down. And then when the governor put the curfew back in, then it rose back up. So it's all about how you interface with the community. You can just see these. I mean, we look back at this, in 6 months, you'll see the different antagonisms got certain reactions. So I think that's something that we all need to learn from too. When we think about the militarization of the police departments, and how do you engage a community? Because that kind of thing especially can happen really anywhere.
But again, it comes back, if you want your police department to be representative of your community, as a leader, as a mayor, or whoever you are in that community, you will be able to bring forces together to do some diversity training, work with people, and understand things in a different nationality. Because if you don't, my mind goes back to 1967. The same thing happened in Newark, New Jersey, and I was in that. I was in that area of Newark that was where the rioting was taking place. 1967. 1967. Google it. You can find.
Oh no, yeah, no.
1967, okay. And they brought in the National Guards. And you have to have people that's going to be able to.
What sparked that riot? Was that after
it was a
Martin
young
Luther?
black, and if I'm going back, it's been a long time ago.
Okay.
A young black man that was shot.
Okay.
And
similar circumstances.
Yes, similar
by the
circumstances. Yes.
Okay.
So when this started, I says, "Oh my God!" Here we into 2014. And really nothing has changed because the same thing is happening, and why is it that it's always our young black men?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yesterday in Hartford, a young guy was teased, 18 years old, okay? He was, teased, the policeman had a taser. Okay, and I assume that he's still in the hospital. But I'm just saying, to have a community as diversified as Danbury, with everyone in here bringing something to the table. You have to have people in control that want to work with people and not just close the door because we don't want the blacks over here in these positions. Go around to City Hall. See how many black people they got working out in City Hall. See how many black policemen Danbury have. We have not gotten to Ferguson yet. It has not hit us yet. But you know what? We don't never know what's going to come down the pipe.
So let me just. So your sense is that if there was more minority representation in the police force, in city government, in some of the fire department,
and even just say a normal secretary, because we have certain companies around here that don't believe in having a black minority people sitting at their front desks greeting people and answer the. Oh yes,
you know the TV show Mad Men. You ever watch that?
No,
it's about the '60s. They had the same thing. It's set in the '60s. It's an advertising firm down in Manhattan, and they had a show on it where there was a minority lady, an African American lady, and they had her in the front, and the executive said, "No, we shouldn't have that." But hold on. I'm calling a timeout here, because haven't we gotten past that? I mean, give me from the Caucasian perspective, if you will, a couple things. One, and I mentioned it in the opening, the President of the United States is an African American. Iowa is 98% Caucasian. He won the Iowa primaries. He was reelected. The Attorney General of the United States is an African American. At what point do we say how much more post-racial, colorblind society can we be?
But
now, you
Marty-
say we might have a president in the White House, but we don't have a secretary down at City Hall in Danbury. I mean, it rings
But
a
Marty,
little bit hollow.
look at how difficult it is that they are making it for him to lead.
Okay, let me get this straight. So when George W. Bush was in office, it was a love fest and no one had anything bad to say about him?
But I think that let's not get too far afoot here. I think that let's get back to what the issues are. Yeah, and you made that statement. Every one of us, all three of us, have at least one police-related story where it happened to us, or a family member, or a best friend. I would dare say that was in a negative harassment or something of that nature. I would dare say that you don't have three friends that have a police-related story. That's a day-to-day thing.
I have my history, but we can't get into it now. But I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
And I would also say that we talked about
I know
this
what you're saying. I
earlier,
agree.
that as a person with children, and we say, and Eric Holder talked about this about his own son. He said, I have a special conversation with my son about how he needs to act in public.
Yeah.
You don't need to have that conversation with your son.
You're right.
You don't
You're
have
right.
that conversation. And not because your son's doing something wrong or he's going to stand out, and not that conversation. But the conversation is, because you're an African-American male, you need to carry yourself in a different way than somebody who's not.
Right.
That's a different platform.
I don't deny that. And if it's 11:30 at night and you're down in Manhattan and you're trying to flag a cab, they're going to go by the African American and they'll pick up maybe a Caucasian, possibly. I don't know. And
I see that
do
argument about having the black president, like saying, well, I have a black friend. Or,
Okay.
go back to the
Yeah,
to the
well,
70s when
yeah.
you had the Indian in the canoe,
Some of my best friends are
Exactly.
African
So
American.
it's the same thing. It doesn't change what folks go through on a day-to-day
Daily
basis.
basis, right.
And people who grow up, in Redding, Connecticut, where I grew up, all they know is white people.
Right.
And their whole perspective is their little cocoon of Reading. They have no idea what people in Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport might be going through, and depending on how they were raised in that little cocoon of whiteness, will, if they don't get any experience in college or diversify in their own life, that's all they've got. And so that's what they're bringing to the table. Now when they're in charge of their company, they bring, if they were raised by somebody who was biased or had that and passed it on to them, and they were never exposed to anything different, that's what they're gonna manifest to everybody else. So whether the president is black is not changing whether that person is a racist or has a bias in them, and then perpetuates that through a position of power.
Well, I would say just across the board nationally, by the election and re-election of Barack Obama, we're showing at least some non-racial bias for an elected
Would be
official.
more.
I mean, you got to give us props for something
agree
here.
with that.
All right, so we made progress here.
I agree.
A lot of props.
Speaking of
Poor Marty.
Speaking of one of my best friends, we're joined by the caller. How are you? Al Robinson has a blog called Hat City Blog. Hat City Blog, go to it. There's always something entertaining.
Well, there's a few things I want to bring up. First of all, I recall back in 2009, after I came back from Washington to see the inauguration of President Obama, you were on TV and I was sitting right next to you on that very set. You said, "Oh, Barack Obama is president. There's no more racism in this country." And I'll never forget laughing in your face, purposely laughing in your face, saying,
Hey, I like a happy ending. Come on.
Well, it just goes to show that, you just don't get it. Ferguson, for instance, the population of Ferguson, the demographic, over 70% African American. Over 70% African American. How many men of color on the police force? 3.
Three.
The mayor, 70% African American, the mayor is white. Does anybody on the panel know the mayor's name? It's probably because he's sitting there in a spider hole, avoiding the whole situation. It's a lack of leadership.
I believe they pretty much
a lack of representation upon the police force that does not make up the community, and that's a huge, huge problem. I mean, Michael Brown, that poor person gets shot in the street, made public. Think about how many other Michael Browns have been in Ferguson that's not been reported, not been on the TV. there is such
How
a
many other
huge
police shootings in Ferguson,
law
Missouri?
enforcement and minorities is outrageous. And then speaking in terms of Connecticut, you can look no further than East Haven and the situation that happened down there, where the father, I forget his name, but he was harassed by police officers. Luckily, he had his cell phone camera on him. He showed that he was getting harassed, and he won a lawsuit. Danbury, as your panelists were correct in stating that, we have a problem with African Americans on the Danbury police force, the lack of them. It's been a long problem. It's happening in Danbury forever. Like Latinos in the police force, probably we wouldn't have had the Danbury 11 situation or problems within the immigrant community with the police force if there's more minorities on the police force. You know, there's huge problems going on here, and the real problem is just that people have been ignoring it for so long. And I think that's why you have such outrage in Ferguson now, because people are just fed up. Just fed up with the whole thing. This is something that's been going on for a long time. Minorities have been complaining about this for a long time. And people of power have been ignoring it for a very long time. Until it blows up in your face, and now it's like, oh my God, what's going on here? Well, you just haven't been paying attention, because you've been purposely not paying attention. So people are now just pissed off, and they're just tired of, like, you know, talking. They want action. And
So what would action, how would action, and I'll ask this to the people here on the thing, what would action look like? What is it that would...
Here's a perfect example, and I think your fellas will know this scene. All right, in the movie Do the Right Thing, all right, when there's so much tension and anger going on, and it's one pound of keg moment. Spike Lee picks up the trash can, screams hate, and he throws the trash can through Sal's Pizzeria, and you have, you know, Ruby Dee saying, burn it down, burn it down. And it's just going to that point where people are just like, you know what, the hell with this. I'm tired of listening to you, I'm burning this joint down. Maybe you'll hear that. You're just getting to the point where it's like you have so many opportunities to diffuse this situation, to address it. It's almost to the point where it might be like too late, because people are just too fed up. I mean, how many more Trayvon Martins do we need to see? How many more Michael Browns do we need to see? I mean, it gets to the point where enough is enough. And I think that's where Jason was talking about, hey, I want to go out there and protest too. I want to go out there and protest also. What I saw on TV was just outrageous. You got cops there with scopes pointing towards the crowds, popping off tear gas like we're in Iraq or Beirut or something. It's outrageous.
Okay.
And you wouldn't see that in certain other neighborhoods if the population was tipped the other way and it was a majority of Caucasians. You would see tear gas and scopes and stuff, things of that nature. So you're just getting to the point where it's like you're almost too late. People just had enough of this. We've seen too many examples of this, and no action from people who had an opportunity to do something, and it's just going to blow up. I mean, that's how I feel. I'm just very pissed off about it. And it's not right that in this day and age, I have to worry about my son when he grows up, whether or not, you know, if I close my door and say, hey, go out there and have fun and do whatever you want to do, will he come back alive? And I'm talking about here in the Northeast. You know, I mean, it's not right, it's wrong, but unfortunately, you have certain people in this country who just don't give a damn, because they're all nice and comfortable in their nice little homes in the suburbs, and they think it doesn't matter to them because it doesn't affect us. When what's happening in Ferguson affects all of us.
All right.
You get to that point where you
Let me
really
just
say, hey, look, this is not about black and white. It's about us as Americans, and treat us as an American issue, racism as an American issue. To really address it, you're not going to get anywhere. And
Okay.
It's unfortunate for me to say something like that when we have an African American president, but that's just the way it is.
Okay, let me give you a little pushback on some of this, and maybe some of this here too. Let me give you sort of the other side of some of what you're saying, and that is, and you may say it's unfortunate that that video was put out there, but the gentleman that was shot, the young man that was shot, and I think it was a tragedy all the way around. But what I saw in the video when he strong-armed that deli owner or whatever the little store was and took the cigars and pushed the guy, and then the guy was trying to hold the door closed and he went back and threatened him, that, for those people you're talking about in the pearly white suburbs sitting up in their houses, when they see that, they say, yeah, you know, that's frightening. That's a breakdown of law and order. Let me go to video 2. And the other one is when you have the mob in front of the convenience store, the guy takes out a gun, shoots the door 3 times. Then you have the camera inside the video store, and you see guys streaming in there and just ransacking the place. You know, you talk about those people out in the pearly white suburbs, when they see something like that, they see a breakdown in law and order, and they say, what the heck? You know, what's going on? Now, I understand your perspective.
Well, again, Marty, you're saying what the heck now, but, you know, you're saying what the heck at this situation now, and 20 years ago, when Rodney King was getting his head bashed in, and people were like, and so many other examples of that. They don't need to go into, especially in New York. We have just countless examples of that happening in New York. Countless examples in the last 20 years.
I know, even on Staten Island this weekend, the guy died in a chokehold by the police. I understand that, but at some point...
It gets to a point where we're just sick of it. And you have ample opportunity to address it. Ample opportunity, because racism and the problems associated with racism are widespread. Some of them can be taken care of very easily, some of them can't. Like in Ferguson, if I was in Ferguson right now, I would set up a voter registration booth and say, hey, look, you're pissed off, register.
Actually, they already did that, right adjacent to the spot where there was a Democratic voter registration thing. Let me ask you this, and this is a...
There should be.
Okay, well there is, because if Democrats get voted in and we have minority representation by Democrats, all this will go away, or that's what we're told. Okay, Al, let me ask you this, and I'll close with this, Al.
Ferguson, it's due to our own selves, our own fault. I mean, African American.
I mean, from our perspective.
Hold on, Al.
In the first place, it wouldn't be a makeup like that.
Al, let me ask you one last question. If it turns out that this young man actually did punch this police officer, broke his eye socket, and then he actually rushed the police, I'm just saying, if it turns out that way, will you still feel as if this is a racist expression by a militarized police force that are gunning down black people in cold blood? Or will you see that there's another perspective?
No. I'll be real fast with this, because I know how you act. I know your skill set. All right.
My skill set?
The thing is this: the reaction by the police force a couple of days ago that I saw on CNN was so over the top, so crazy. You wouldn't see that in certain other communities. It is outrageous.
Okay, but that wasn't my question.
Marty, let me finish. It's outrageous when you have a city in which 70% African American, you only have 3 African American police officers. That's absolutely outrageous.
Okay, all right.
And you don't know
Al, we got a panelist here.
There's going on right now. There's another report that said, hey, the person who shot that poor kid didn't even know there was a robbery in effect. There's another report that said that the guy who owned the convenience store didn't even call 911.
Well, guess what? The guy that was shot...
Wait till a full investigation is done.
Okay, Al, we got to wrap up. My guests are getting...
Don't shoot kids over cigars.
Okay. All right.
But let me say,
Al, thank you for the call. You want to stay on the line? You can stay on the line if you want.
There needs to be a level of sensitivity. You are 4 times more likely to be arrested in Danbury, Connecticut if you're African American and if you're not. Look at a study by OPM. There are across the state, you could be arrested just because for the same crime, 4 times more likely in Danbury, 7 times in some communities, 8 times in some communities if you are a person of color. Connecticut has one of the most comprehensive studies looking at youth and youth involvement with the juvenile justice system as any state in this. And we have, I think, 12 years now worth of looking at data. They're looking at pure data and realizing that you are going to be you're more apt to have contact and be arrested in a town. And it's across, whether you're looking at rural communities or whether you're looking at suburban communities or urban communities, you are more apt. So what Al is talking about is we have to do something now. How many police departments are now doing some soul searching and say, what can I do to make myself more sensitive to this situation? Am I getting training? Am I sitting my beat cops? Am I on the streets? When that happens, those numbers drop. When those policemen get that training, those numbers decline, and they're not out of proportion. So we should be asking communities like Danbury or New Haven or whatever, should be saying, why don't we get that training? That training is offered by OPM in the state of Connecticut, absolutely free. Only about 20%, 30% of the police departments in the state are really taking advantage of that. Why is it?
Caller, do you have something to add?
Yes, I would just thank you for your guests. They are very informed, and I'm enjoying listening to them. What I would like to ask them is, they seem very involved. Would they, what are they doing to inspire not just the black youth, but every youth to become educated, to pursue their dreams? What are their specific things that they're doing in their communities? Because they're very informed and seem very energetic in their pursuit.
Okay, good question. What about that? Because I think there's a sense of hopelessness for the young black adolescent in urban settings in America. The level of unemployment is 2.5 times what it is on average. You talked about statistics. In New York City, it's 25% black, yet 2/3 of the violent crime are a result of minority participation in that. And 91% of murders, it's black on black murders that are taking place.
And most white murders are white on white murders too.
No, you got a good point. Maybe we all just.
I mean, if you want to look at the data, most white murders are white on white. So that's not. So let's point that out. When you're looking at the fact, and back to my point, and you start to where the first level of contact that young people get with policemen. African American and Hispanic males are more apt to have earlier contact with police, no matter what community they live in, whether suburban or urban. So let's
Can I just hold you right there? Is that the police's fault?
Let me go back. It is. You look at that. It is.
It is the police's fault that they're having more contact with police.
I'm not blaming the police. I'm not blaming anybody. What I'm asking is that the police record that down. I came upon 3 kids standing outside of the library, and I was inquiring why were they standing here. That's not across the board. If there are 3 non-African American or non-Hispanic kids standing outside of the storefront, they don't get asked why you are here. So that's the difference. And so when we find that the policemen get the proper training, or even educators get proper training, those numbers diminish across the board. Across the board. So that's what I'm advocating for.
As far as the police piece, I think part of it too is they have to live in the community sometimes. I mean, I think that's a big piece. So regardless of race, when you live in the community, you know, you begin to understand the community better. You have a better way of...
It's a partnership.
Right,
It's
and
a
you're part of it.
You understand.
So if you're coming from, 20 miles away and you're trying to, do policing in an urban setting, I don't think that works too good. Because you don't have an investment in that community. Right. You don't get to know the people, on that block. They don't get to know you. You don't have the rapport. You don't feel invested in the community. So that's actually an area that I think that we need to revisit. We need to be able to reward police officers and firefighters for living in their community and being a part of it. I think, I also think that, in terms of growing our police forces so that they are more accurately reflective, one of the things that's interesting that I've learned is, you think about it, Reading and Bethel and Ridgefield and some of the surrounding towns, the young people that grow up, they get to be volunteer firefighters. They're a part of that volunteerism in that community. You go to urban setting, those kids don't get a chance to be a volunteer firefighter or really be a part of the police force. So that's one of the things.
In cases, there isn't a father in the home. These are single parent.
That's true and not true. But
being a single parent, because you know what, I hate this so-called stereotype that believe because you're a single mom, your child is going to be bad, and that's not true. And maybe there might not be a father in that home, but that single mom loves her child and can work with that child. She has no control what that young man does once he come out of her house. But I hate that terminology because that child came from a single parent home and there was no father there, that they're not going to do well, and that's not true.
And that's why I think it goes, excuse me, Gladys, but I think that's why we go back to to the point, it's the policeman. No, you cannot control all the variables that exist in any community.
The fact of the matter is, if that was a white kid, going back to your original
Right.
point with Al on the phone, a white kid walking down that particular street at that particular time with that particular cop, that cop would not have told the kid, number one, to get out of the street. Number two, that cop wouldn't have pulled back. Number three, that cop would have never pulled his gun on that white kid. Just wouldn't have happened. That's my perspective.
And that's
now,
the reality.
that is my perspective, regardless of whether there's an issue with not having a father in the home, regardless of whatever the socioeconomic circumstances of whatever community you want to look at. That particular fact is a reflection of my perspective as to why there is a real serious issue in Ferguson, and why Gladys keeps going back to the point of what is the relationship between the police and the community, and how do they engage that community, and that has to be an issue that we look at. Forget about all the socioeconomic issues.
Right.
Yeah, we got to do all those things, okay? We could debate those on another show. But in this particular case and in these circumstances, the police have got to have a sensitivity. They've got to know how to engage their community. And if they see a black kid, they can't be pulling out their gun because that's all they know how to do. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that's really what the issue is here.
And if we want more elected officials in Ferguson, then we have to get out and do voter registration. Okay, and Reverend Al was very clear the other day when he made this statement. Yes, you know, we're going to have voter registration, but when it comes time to vote, only 6% of the people 6% of that town went out to vote. You got to get up and go vote. So this is how you get your elected.
I said we have,
you have to get your elected officials.
Office,
okay?
and you guys poo-pooed that.
No,
No, we didn't poo-poo with that.
And that's
No,
not
but
the
you know
point.
what? That's back to what Jason is saying, though. Engaging your community. If I don't feel like you represent me, if I don't feel like you're talking the things that I need to hear you talk about, then I am not going to go out and vote. And so that happens. That we as the outreach needs to occur. I agree with you that people have to vote, because that's the ultimate barometer of what's going to happen. But people have been so disenfranchised, as Al said on the phone a few minutes ago, that people have been disenfranchised, and they keep being oppressed. They keep being pushed down. They keep being no matter what. I go, when there's a job, we talk about jobs, when there's a job and 300 and 400 people line up for 40 and 50 jobs in these urban areas, these are not because people don't want to work. It's because jobs don't exist. So, you can think of these people are unemployed. Yeah, they're unemployed because there's no jobs. So you can't blame the victim for not having a job when there's no jobs to have.
Well, that goes full circle to, what's the proper approach to, economics. And I think that free market capitalism is probably the best approach.
Ballywag, you got him.
But,
I'm just saying, you're darn right. When you started to force socialism on America, all of a sudden they're not going to get a lot of jobs.
I'm back to, we can debate that at another time.
Show me a country where communism works, and I'll listen to you.
And we don't have communism here unless you have your own little fiefdom someplace. No. I'm just simply.
Let me just come at it just from a little different perspective, and I think this is healthy. I really do, because I think you're talking about East Haven and Connecticut. I mean, one end of the Route 7 extension down in South Norwalk is totally different than the other end up in Wilton, Connecticut. I live in Ridgefield. I'm telling you, it's not integrated. It's a great place, but it's not integrated, and that's not good. And I think there needs to be an understanding, between the two cultures, and I think it comes to a head as you talk about with police interaction with minority youth. Okay, but I'm going to say some tough stuff now. Okay, the young black adolescent male, when you encounter the police, don't cop an attitude. Don't do it.
Do you tell your son that?
I sure as heck do.
Absolutely, and I tell my son that. I tell my son that as well. And there's no difference between me telling my son that and you telling your son that. However, my son is 4 times more likely to be arrested, even without the attitude. Okay. You have never seen a police report, at least I haven't, that I arrested this kid because he copped an attitude. All right. That has never happened. Okay. Not on a police report that I've seen.
I'm telling you, if this turns out, and we don't know, But if it turns out that this young man, hauled off and shot the
Sharpton said it right, and he said this is about civil rights and the use of deadly force. So when you want to go into those kinds of examples, I got to tell you, that's just you're not dealing with the facts.
Okay,
the fact is that the kid was shot 6 times.
Right.
Okay. So somebody, because he had a bad attitude.
No, because if he assaulted the police officer and the police officer felt
we've
threatened,
all had little
he's allowed
engagements
to.
with police.
Well, little engagement doesn't fracture an eye socket.
Sometimes you
That's
have,
not a little
unfortunately,
engagement.
certain people shouldn't be police officers. And they put a little gun on them, and all of a sudden they're super ego. So you could be
the guy was
as
a police officer
docile
for 6 years, never once had any complaint whatsoever.
that we know of that's written
Okay,
down.
well,
whatever.
maybe it was suppressed. My
That doesn't
point
mean
is,
that he's not a racist. That doesn't mean that you're going to pull out his computer and find all kinds of interesting things on it.
tell you what, I'll work on the Caucasian police side of it and say y'all got to chill out and understand the culture. Could we have
I've
on
been
the
living
other
with white
side of
folks
it
all
say,
my life, trust me.
Okay, could on the other side you say, listen, adolescent young African American males, do not cop attitudes
But
with
we
the police.
do this. She does this as a
well,
teacher.
good.
I
Well, good.
do
And then
this as a community
when
person.
something like this happens, then it can't be, the cops are all racist and that's
no.
why.
And I have not said it. I
no.
never said that.
But I
And what
reject that you would say it that way. I'm sorry. You got to teach all kids
Right.
not to cop an attitude,
right.
period.
I agree.
But then it also
that's just part of youth
it's
development
also
what
about
you teach kids.
how
It's not
that-
just the black kids.
Yes.
I have a
It
problem.
also is about how that cop, how he says what he has to say to that kid.
And a
You
good
know?
example would be the guy that pointed the gun at the one at the curb and said, "I will effing kill you." That's not exactly a touchy-feely
Right.
approach to policing. I get it.
They
I get
handcuffed
it.
the 91-year-old lady the other night, which didn't make no kind of sense whatsoever. What in the world could a 91-year-old lady do?
I listen, thank you for coming in. I appreciate it, and I do want to have you listen. Like I was telling you, I want you to come in whenever you have anything you want to talk about other than an unfortunate altercation like this. You're more than welcome to come in. I really appreciate the time.
I hope we have had an opportunity to raise your level of sensitivity.
I think yeah. No, I come away from this and I think it's important to have an open exchange of ideas, and we need to talk to each other. And I think that's what we've accomplished. And let's hope for the best in Missouri, that justice is served and they get to the bottom of what exactly happened there.
Well, that's
We
what the
all can learn from it.
NAACP's position is right now, that there be an external investigator that will get to the bottom of the issues, not only in this situation, but that know that the system does work. We need the system
Yes.
to work.
Well,
Yes.
if we got Eric Holder there right now, we got 3 different simultaneous investigations going on. This isn't going to be Mississippi burning, something gets, shoved under the rug. I think there will be a full vetting of all the facts and let the chips fall where they may.
We need the system to work.
And we need to
Yes.
not have in America, this kind of stuff going on our TVs. I just don't. We're better than this, and
Oh,
I
agree
totally
with you
agree.
there.
thank you for
Totally
coming in.
agree.
I really do
Okay.
appreciate it. I
Thank
really do
you.
appreciate it. All right, this show rolls on. And next we have probably one of my favorite people in the whole world. There's some people that talk about doing good and benefiting the world and what they're going to do for the people, but my next guest is actually putting her words into action. And she has a program that she's doing in some underprivileged areas of Jamaica, and it's just incredible. But what I want to talk about briefly in this transitionary period is, believe it or not, this past week we had a bit of a breakthrough from the situation with ISIS and the Muslim community. And it's a small slimmer of hope in an otherwise grisly week that unfolded. And we saw probably the worst of mankind in the brutal murder of that journalist. But in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Grand, and let me get his picture up here. If we can get a picture of that. The Saudi Grand Mufti Sheikh Abdullah Aziz Al Shai said the following in relation to extremist militant Islamicists. He says, extremist and militant ideas and terrorism which spreads decay on the earth, destroying human civilization, are not in any way part of Islam, but our enemies are the number one enemy of Islam. Let me say that again. He said that the extremists and the militant ideas and terrorism which spread decay on the earth and destroy human civilization are not in any way part of Islam, but are a number one enemy of Islam. At long last, we're seeing Islamist Muslim leaders taking a stand against the extremism that we see in Islam. Now, this may just be a false start. It may just be a hope on my part. But when you have the grisly murder of a helpless journalist by a group that claims to represent God and claims to represent one of the world's great religions, it's going to take a house cleaning inside that religion to come against that. And I might point out that Islam and that what we're seeing with ISIS is not the only time that a great religion has attempted to be hijacked by self-serving, bloodthirsty people that are out for their own ends. We have the same thing in Christianity with the Ku Klux Klan. They claim some sort of flaming cross, some sort of association with Christianity, but Christians throughout history have absolutely abhorred and rejected any manifestation of that. So what I saw by this sheikh in Saudi Arabia, the Grand Mufti's comments were the latest of several Muslim leaders, both religious and secular, from Indonesia to Egypt, condemning the actions and the view of ISIS. At long last, hopefully, we're beginning to see a bit of a turning from within the Muslim community against their violent, homicidal manifestations of their religion. They don't speak for you. Speak out against it, and hopefully we'll have a more peaceful world. Thank you for coming in. I am so delighted that you're here.
I am excited.
What did you think of our conversation talking about Missouri? Give us your perspective.
I just got a brief portion of it, so I actually just came in. I didn't hear the bulk of the conversation, and I am particularly not someone that casts blame. However, I think on both sides of the fence, people have low tolerance for each other. So people jump the gun too often. I remember as a young person, when there was conflict, discussion takes place. Discussion doesn't happen anymore, not with adults and not with young people. So as the panelists rightfully say, you can't be too ready to draw your gun, regardless of ethnicity or culture. Talk something, because most times the police officers are parents too. So instead of seeing a black kid or a Latino kid or a Jewish kid, why don't you just see a kid? And if you can internalize that from a parent's perspective, that child could be mine. What kind of a dialogue you're ready to have with that child? There would not be so many bodies lying.
Yeah. I think it's a good point.
Yes.
Tell us about your foundation, what you're involved with, what the motivation is, what you're doing in Jamaica, and what you've been up to.
Okay. Well, my foundation is called the Empowering People Foundation, Inc., and it was founded to feed hot breakfast to children at my former elementary school in Jamaica. Back in 2012, I went down to Jamaica, and I went with my son to the dentist. My son now lives in Jamaica. I went to the dentist, and I was standing outside of the dentist's office waiting on his godfather to come and get me. And a young man tapped me on the shoulder and handed me a newsletter. I put it in my purse. When I went home, I began thumbing through the newsletter.
Right.
I had no idea that I was standing outside of a church.
Okay.
So when I looked on it, I realized here was a church in Jamaica having 4 services a day.
Wow.
They started at 7 a.m. and they finish at 7 p.m. So that was 7 a.m., 10, 3,
What type
and
of a
7.
church? Was this a Catholic church? Or non-denominational?
Non-denominational. And
Okay.
for me, coming from Jamaica, that was not the norm.
Yeah.
Normally people would just go to church on Sunday, not during the week.
Okay.
So I said, let me go check it out and see what was going on there. And I went, and I was really touched by what was happening. So I started going. For the first 8 days I was down there, I was going to the 10 o'clock service. And one day I walked out of the service and I heard a voice said to me, go to the country.
Okay.
So when Javante came to get me, I said, Javante, we are going to country.
Hold on, who's Javante?
My son.
Oh, okay.
So he
Okay.
said, country, mommy? I said, yes. I said, let's go get gas. We head into the country. I had never brought him to the country where I was born and raised, in the rural parts.
Okay.
Because
So you came to America and you raised your son American? I mean,
No,
in the
I
sense-
came to America. I
Okay.
left my son in Jamaica at age 6. Came to America. No, I left him at 3. And then he came to America when he was 6.5.
Okay.
So he didn't know about the rural parts.
Oh, okay.
So I'm taking him back there now to show him. And there were some new roads that developed all these many years I had not gone there. Over 30 years I did not go back.
Okay.
And there were many roads. And then the road I took to go to the country, and I'm saying, how come I can't get to Darliston yet? Where is the next place I'm supposed to get to after I left Montego Bay? Realized I was in a place called New Roads, which was closest. I said, oh, Javante, I don't know what happened, but we are going the back way in. So we're going to start at the farmer's market I attended as a child.
Okay.
Then I'm going to show you where we live as a child, and I'm going to take you to my church and my school. So we went the back roads, and I'm showing him the little trail that we used to walk to go to the house. And with tears in his eyes, he said, Mommy, all these years I've heard you spoke about your humble beginnings. I just get it. I didn't understand what it meant.
Oh.
So went around showing the district, went up to my old school. Everything, Marty, was the same.
Okay.
The same little canteen. The only change, there was a horse shed that the rich people in my days used to ride horses to church, and we walked because we were poor, so we walked.
Okay.
They rode horses. They put the horses under the shed, fed them water, then they ride home again.
Okay.
Now that horse shed was now an early childhood center. And I was so excited, and I saw the tank with the water, and I'm saying, Javante, this is where the water is. And I go down, it's the same little kitchen. There was a new roof. I peeked through the window, and they had a gas stove. When I was there, they cooked on wood fire.
Okay.
So I looked in and I said to the lady, I used to be a student here. I said, oh my God, you have a refrigerator. She said, yes, ma'am, we have electricity now, and we have a gas stove and everything. So I went inside, and the principal of the school is a girl I knew when she was 3 years old. So I went in, and I said, I'm looking for Miss Richards, and she looked up and she said, there is a God. And I said, Gwen, is that you? Because I hadn't seen her. I didn't know what kind of woman she turned
And she said there is a God.
Yes, and
Okay.
she says, Miss Sweetie, I remember, God, that's what they call me in Jamaica. She said, I
can see
remember.
that.
She said, I remember how kind you were to me as a child.
Okay.
And I always pray to God to let me see you again. And that's why she said, there is a God. So I said, Gwen, how long you're the principal? She told me. I said, how is this school? She said, you know, some things the same, some things different. She said, now the kids get to go to high school automatically.
Okay.
When I was growing up, you had to pass the common entrance exam to go to high school. Or if your parents were rich,
Right.
they would pay for you to go.
Okay.
Now the kids automatically just go into
So
high
now,
school.
I sense that you're a spiritual person. Do you sense that there was God's will that was sort of unfolding in this?
For me to go there?
Yeah, to go back there, and she said, now I know there's a God, and she was sort of
Yes,
praying for
but
the same thing, and it was
Yes.
a divine appointment. It sounded.
Yes. However, I did not get that affirmation until I asked her about the question about the school.
Okay.
And she said, one problem. And my judgmental part jumped in, oh, these kids are smoking pot.
Okay.
Because it's a farming community, you know.
Yeah.
And I said, what's the problem? She
I
said,
don't
the
want to
kids-
stereotype, but I know what you're getting at. Yeah.
Honestly, I'm
Yeah.
being honest. That's what happened. I figured the kids are,
Yeah.
smoking pot. And she said, no, the kids are coming to school without breakfast. Immediately that voice said to me, that's why I sent you here today. So
okay.
out of that came the breakfast feeding program.
Okay.
And with tears in my eyes, I said to her, Gwen, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to make a commitment to feed hot breakfast to these children 5 days a week.
Wow.
So that's how I came back, found the
Did
foundation.
we get an email or a website for you? How, if people want to help and they want to
People
support,
want to help, they
what do
can-
they Google? I'm a big Google guy. What can they Google? What's the name of the foundation? Name of the
Yes,
nonprofit?
but the money we collect, we haven't built the website yet, so that's
Oh,
it.
okay, okay. Uh-huh.
However, GoFundMe.com,
GoFundMe.com.
GoFundMe.com/1,
Okay.
the letter G, the number 4, letter M, 38
Wow.
is where they can donate.
Okay.
And with your help, Marty, because just today I was sharing the experience I had with you inviting me
Yeah.
and connected me with Terry Wilcox that
Oh,
really
yeah, yeah,
invested time.
Did Terry get in touch?
Yes.
He's
I
the director
called
of the
him
Bridgeport Rescue Mission.
Rescue Mission.
Right.
Invited me up. I met with him. He gave me
excellent.
some great insights on
Oh, yeah.
what to do.
Yeah.
And that's, if I had to pay a consultant for that information that he gave me, I could not have paid for it. So I want to thank you. So
All right.
as I sit here today,
Yes.
we have so far raised $1,415.
Excellent.
And on September 3rd, we'll be cooking the first batches of breakfast.
Oh, that's
So I'm
fantastic.
extremely excited. And to be honest, I know a lot of people, and I was thinking even if everybody gave me 25 cents, I would have raised a lot of money, and
Sure.
it didn't happen.
Right.
And I was slightly discouraged. And then I said, God, you sure you want me to do this? And he says, start where you are, the rest will come. So I'm
Wow.
doing exactly that.
Can't steer a parked car. You got to
I
move.
like that. You can't steer a parked car, you got to move.
You got to move.
Yes.
And you're going back, and it's your home, the village that you grew up in, and you brought your
Paidstown.
son along. It's an incredible story.
Thank you.
Well, listen, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having
I
me.
appreciate it. And if you have any questions, just go to the Marty Heiser Show. We'll get your website. When you get it, we'll put it up there
Yes.
so people can donate, and
Yes.
it's an incredible thing.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Listen,
so
I
much.
want to thank my guests today. It's been an interesting show. There's some serious things to talk about, and I'm just glad we had the conversation. Join us again next week on the Marty Heiser Show, and I really don't have a clue what we're going to talk about because I don't know what's going to happen. Missouri, who'd have thought it? See you next week. Thanks for joining us. Good night.